Snow covered the streets of Chicago with a white blanket, shining under the lights that hung across the roads. In every house, people were celebrating, singing, and laughing. The air carried the smell of pine trees and ginger cookies. It was Christmas Eve, a night of warmth and joy for most families. Inside a tall mansion at the end of Oak Avenue, the Monroe family was hosting their usual grand Christmas party. Their halls were filled with music and chatter, their tables heavy with food and wine. Expensive decorations sparkled on every wall. It looked like a perfect night, but behind the smiles and laughter, something painful was waiting to happen. He wore a dark suit that fit well, but his heart was heavy. His eyes followed the crowd only once in a while, mostly searching for one person. Leila Monroe, his wife, moved among the guests like a woman from a dream. There was a distance between them that no number of years or parties could hide. They had been married for almost 5 years. When they met, Ethan had fallen for her charm and kindness. Back then, their love was simple. He remembered their first Christmas together in a small apartment where they had shared instant noodles by candlelight when power went out. He raised his glass and smiled, speaking about family and new beginnings. "Ethan, let's finish this tonight," she said softly so others would not hear her. He felt the room swirl, the lights dancing around him like ghosts. The Monroes had planned it during their Christmas party. It was a show of control, mixed with celebration. For a long minute, Ethan said nothing. He stared at the snowflakes outside the window. He remembered the promise they once made to never let pride break them apart. He placed the pen on the folder and looked at her again. "Merry Christmas, Lila," he whispered. She nodded, her lips forming a half-smile that looked polite rather than kind. She turned away quickly and joined her family again. He walked toward the door, his steps quiet, his mind echoing with the sound of every past Christmas they had spent together. No one tried to stop him. In fact, very few noticed. Outside, the night was colder than before. The wind hit his face and his eyes filled with tears. The snow sparkled under the streetlight as if the sky was trying to offer comfort. He walked away slowly, past the laughter that followed him from inside the house. He wiped his tears, but another one rolled down, streaking his cheek like a mark of both pain and freedom. Somewhere deep inside him, a small voice spoke. It said that this night might break his heart, but it would not define him. The paper he had signed might end his marriage, but it would not end his worth. He did not look back as he reached the end of the driveway. Behind him, the house shone bright like a jewel. Inside it, people toasted and laughed, forgetting that a gentle soul had once stood among them. Ethan lifted his head toward the dark sky, watching the snow fall thicker and thicker. He breathed in the cold air and kept walking until the sound of music faded behind him. The night swallowed his footsteps, and only the light from the street lamps guided his path. It was the loneliest Christmas he had ever known, but also the beginning of something neither Lila nor her family could ever imagine. The night passed slowly and the city lights faded behind Ethan as he walked home. The snow had thickened on the streets, crunching under his shoes. His apartment was small but warm, a quiet place that felt both safe and lonely. When he entered, he placed his coat on the chair and sat by the window. He could still hear the echo of laughter from the party in his mind. Every smile and word from Leela's family repeated like a cruel memory. He tried to rest, but his heart felt heavy and restless. The papers he had signed stayed in his thoughts, each line of ink like a cut on his chest. By morning, the sun broke through the gray clouds, touching the world with soft light. He made himself a cup of coffee and looked at his reflection in the window. His eyes looked tired, but there was a strange calmness in them. The pain was strong, but underneath it something new was growing. He did not want to spend his days filled with sadness. He wanted to build something that gave meaning again. For weeks, Ethan stayed alone, working late at night on his ideas. He had always been good with technology and business plans. Even before his marriage, he had dreamed of creating his own company, but the Monroes had never believed in his ideas. It said he was reaching too high, that his ambition was foolish. Their words had once hurt him, but now they became his fuel. He began to plan his own path quietly, without telling anyone. His apartment turned into a small office filled with notes, sketches, and his laptop always open. Outside, winter turned to spring. The city woke up with sound again. Ethan met new people through old business friends. Some remembered his hard work from earlier years and respected his persistence. Slowly, he built a small team with those who shared his vision. They worked from early morning until late night. Their goal was to create a company that improved energy systems using clean technology. It was something that mattered for the future, and each step gave Ethan new purpose. One day, while sitting in a small coffee shop, Ethan overheard two businessmen talking at a nearby table. They were speaking about the Monroe family company. He froze for a moment when he heard the name. The men talked about problems in their investments, about mismanagement and pride. Ethan kept silent, but inside he felt no joy at their trouble. He did not want revenge, just wanted to build his own life, free from their shadow. Weeks turned into months. His company grew faster than anyone had thought. Investors started noticing, and soon his team moved to a proper office downtown. The sign outside the building read SilverLine Holdings, and Ethan looked at it one evening with quiet pride. Everyone in the office respected him not as a wealthy man son-in-law, but as a leader with vision and care. He treated people kindly, listening to their thoughts, giving them space to grow. Sometimes at night, when all work lights went off, he would stand by the window overlooking the city. He wondered where Leela was, and if she was truly happy. He did not wish her harm, only understanding. He had once believed she loved him for who he was, so maybe she had in her own way. But love that depends on wealth and pride cannot survive hardship. He knew that now, and although the memory still ached, it no longer controlled him. Summer arrived. Business magazines began to mention SilverLine Holdings as a new rising name. Reporters wanted to meet the man behind the brand. Ethan refused most requests, preferring privacy. His work spoke for him. With time, the company expanded into more industries and attracted partnerships from larger corporations. Among those businesses struggling under new market rules was Monroe Enterprises. Though they had no idea that the silent force behind their competition was the man they had once laughed at, Ethan learned to smile again, not in arrogance, but in peace. He started jogging in the mornings, meeting his small group of colleagues for lunch, sometimes helping charities that focused on youth education. His life became full, simple, and meaningful. The pain he once carried began to fade like old snow melting under sunlight. When winter returned, his assistant brought him a notice about a new corporate purchase that would soon take place. SilverLine Holdings had been offered a proposal to acquire a damaged branch of a large business chain, a name he almost did not believe when he read it. It was the Monroe family's finance division, the same one under pressure for poor management. He set the paper aside and took a slow breath. It was strange how the world worked in quiet circles. That night, after everyone left, he sat alone in the silent office and looked out at the falling snow. The sight reminded him of that Christmas night when everything seemed lost. Yet now, the same snow carried a message of calm. He was no longer the man who left a mansion in tears. He was someone stronger, someone who had learned that true success is not about proving others wrong, but about proving to yourself that you can rise when the world thinks you are done. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the peace of that truth fill him. Autumn arrived with sharp winds and golden trees. The city looked calm under bright skies, while Silverline Holdings continued to grow stronger each week. Ethan Cole had become known among business circles as a young and fair-minded leader. Many respected the way he worked with his team, always patient, always clear in his goals. Though his office was now high above the busy streets, he still carried the same quiet manner he had when he started with nothing but his laptop and a dream. Every morning he reached his office before sunrise. He liked to sit by the large window and watch the early trains move through the city. It reminded him how life never stopped, even when people faced pain or failure. The hum of the streets below was like a soft reminder of everything he had been through and the strength he had gained. His company now had departments for tech research, clean energy, and financial support for young entrepreneurs. His employees worked with excitement because he inspired them to believe that success did not have to come from pride or pressure. In private moments, Ethan smiled at how far he had come in only a year. One afternoon, his assistant Clara entered his office with news that made him pause. She handed him a folder and said a large acquisition had been confirmed. Silverline Holdings had officially secured control of a luxury group that owned smaller companies, including Monroe Enterprises. Ethan felt the weight of the name hit him like a whisper from the past. He opened the folder and read the documents slowly. The deal had already been completed by his team of lawyers. He was now the owner of the company that belonged to the family who once saw him as unworthy. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, silent and thoughtful. The room felt still, almost too quiet. Clara watched him carefully and asked if something was wrong. He shook his head with a soft smile and told her everything was fine. He did not want to show the storm of feelings in his chest, the mix of memory, relief, and restraint. He had dreamed of building his future, but never in this form. Still, fate had found its way. The next few days were filled with meetings and changes. He kept his identity private from the companies under the new group. The public announcement of the leadership shift would take place near Christmas, the time when annual performance reports were shared. The thought made him remember the last Christmas he had spent, the night filled with humiliation and heartbreak. Life had turned completely since then. The media began to guess who might be leading this silent, rising empire. Journalists described the unknown investor as mysterious and brilliant. Ethan found humor in those articles, imagining the shock that would cross the faces of the Monroe family once the truth was known. But he stopped himself from feeding those thoughts. He reminded his heart that his aim was growth, not revenge. As the season deepened, he visited factories, research labs, and offices under the new group. One of them used to belong directly to the Monroes. It was an old building in need of repair and fresh leadership. He walked through the hallways greeting the workers who looked surprised by his modest and kind approach. Many of them had spent years under strict supervision and poor management. Ethan promised to bring order and respect. He left the building feeling resolved to make the company stronger, not to destroy what others had built. When he returned to his office that evening, he received an invitation to a Christmas celebration from one of the branches he now owned. He turned the letter over and saw the familiar seal. It came from the Monroe family business. For a moment, he felt his breath tighten. The invitation was part of tradition, since the Monroe Company invited all leadership partners to the annual family event. They did not yet know the identity of the new parent company's owner. He placed the letter on his desk and looked at it for a long time. The past and present met in that quiet space, circling one another like memories that refused to die. He could almost hear the sound of laughter that had chased him out a year ago. The choice was his to attend, face them again, or remain distant and silent. He stood and walked to the window. The city was alive with lights and cold wind. Snow had begun falling on the streets again. The man who once walked out broken and in tears had turned into someone stronger and unshaken. Yet even with his success, he still carried gentleness. Not to boast or shame anyone, but to prove something more lasting. that dignity was stronger than pride, that kindness could survive even through betrayal. He turned off the light in his office, and as he left, his reflection caught in the glass wall. He saw in it not a man of wealth, but a man who had rebuilt his life patiently, like snow covering old scars of earth. Cold wind rushed across the streets as another Christmas approached. The lights in shop windows glowed bright against the dark sky. People hurried with gifts and smiles while inside their homes, fires burned warmly. Across the city, the Monroe family was busy preparing for their grand Christmas party. The halls of their mansion were filled with decorations, music, and the scent of cinnamon. It had been 1 year since the last party, the night when Ethan Cole had signed the divorce papers and walked away in tears. No one in the Monroe family spoke of it anymore. They believed that chapter was long closed. Lila Monroe sat in her dressing room, staring at herself in the mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her necklace. She looked beautiful, yet her smile was faint. The past year had not been easy, though her family believed she was happy. Her marriage to Ethan had ended in pity and laughter. But after he left, something had stayed behind inside her heart. Sometimes she heard his last words, quiet and kind, echoing in her memory. Merry Christmas. She had tried to forget, to tell herself he had held her back. Yet there were nights when she missed his calm voice and simple warmth. Her parents were proud of their wealth, but the family business was no longer the same. Their company's profit had dropped, and investors began to whisper of a buyout. Still, her father refused to show worry. He planned this Christmas party to prove their status was strong. He wanted the world to see that the Monroes always stood above others. Lila dressed and went downstairs, joining the guests who were already arriving. The hall sparkled with gold ribbons and crystal lights. Couples danced while servers carried silver trays of wine. People greeted Lila with smiles and gossip. It's the same familiar crowd, the same false joy she had lived with for years. As the party filled the mansion, her father gave a toast, thanking everyone for being there. He spoke proudly about new management that would help their business recover under a new partnership. He told them they would soon meet the representative of the new parent company who would join their celebration that night. Lila clapped politely with everyone else, but her heart felt uneasy. She had heard little about the mysterious company that had bought a large part of their business. No one knew much about it except that it was powerful and expanding quickly. Outside, the snow fell quietly, covering the ground with a white shine. The butler hurried to the main entrance as a sleek, black car stopped before the mansion. He straightened his jacket and opened the doors. The crowd inside heard soft footsteps entering across the marble floor. When they turned toward the entrance, a long silence filled the house. Lila froze in her place. Ethan Cole stood there, dressed in a simple dark suit. He looked calm, his expression steady, his eyes gentle yet strong. The same man they had laughed at now carried himself with quiet power. He smiled politely at the butler and stepped forward as if the house no longer frightened him. The room fell silent, except for the faint sound of music in the background. The Monroes stared like they had seen a ghost. Her father stepped forward uncertainly. He tried to recover his voice, asking if this was some mistake. The company representative they expected was someone else. Ethan spoke kindly, addressing the crowd with cool confidence. He thanked them for the invitation and then explained that Silverline Holdings had fully acquired their business group, and he was attending not as a representative, but as the new CEO. His voice was steady and respectful. Gasps filled the hall. Lila's mother lowered her glass slowly. Her brothers exchanged uneasy looks. A few guests whispered to each other in shock. The air in the room thickened with disbelief. Ethan did not smile with arrogance. He greeted each person with the same politeness they had once denied him. He spoke about partnership and reform, about how the company could grow stronger under cooperation rather than pride. Lila could not move. Her heart beat fast as his eyes met hers. She expected anger or triumph, but instead she saw peace. He walked over, bowed his head slightly and said, "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Monroe." It sounded honest, not bitter. Her hands shook as she returned his greeting. Memories rushed back to her, the good and the painful, the quiet evenings when they had shared simple meals, his laughter, his patience. She realized what she had lost. The guests stayed silent as Ethan continued speaking. He told the assembled group that he believed in fresh beginnings and wished to see success shared with all. He was there to lead, not to humiliate. His words carried weight because they were free from pride. Even those who mocked him before lowered their heads in shame. When he finished his short speech, the music started again, uncertain at first, then stronger. People tried to return to their cheer, but the air had changed. The Monroes could no longer look at him the way they used to. Leela watched as he mingled with others, his calm presence commanding quiet respect. She wanted to speak again, but could not find her voice. Ethan spent the rest of the evening speaking to guests, shaking hands and showing grace that surprised everyone. As the night drew to an end, he walked toward the door while the snow outside thickened again. Lila stood near the railing, watching him leave, feeling tears press at her eyes. He looked back once, gave a faint smile, then stepped into the cold night. Her family stood frozen as the door closed behind him, aware that the man they had mocked was now the one who held the future of their name. The snow outside the Monroe home continued to fall as midnight neared. The lights of the mansion glowed through the white haze, and the sound of music grew softer. Inside, people were still talking about Ethan Cole's return. No one could forget the calm look on his face, or the way he carried himself with quiet strength. The same man they once dismissed now sat at the very top of their world. It was a night that none of them would forget. Ethan stood near the grand door for a moment, watching the golden lights blur through the snowfall outside. He felt a sense of calm he had not known in years. The pain of the past had turned into a lesson. The laughter that once hurt him had turned into silence. He was no longer the man who left that house in tears, could leave now with dignity. Still, a small part of his heart felt heavy. It was not revenge that lingered there, but sadness for what had been lost and could never be regained. Leela watched him from across the hall. Her heart was full of regret, but also pride. She saw what he had become. The strength that had once made her feel small now made her see him differently. Her father moved toward Ethan, trying to find words to fix what pride had broken. He spoke awkwardly, thanking him for his respectful words and saying the family hoped to work with him for many years. Ethan nodded and replied politely that he believed in unity, in learning from the past, and in building a better future. His voice was steady and kind, and there was not a trace of judgment in it. Many guests began to leave, still whispering about what they had witnessed. The Monroe family stood together, looking humbled. Ethan turned once more to the hall that had once been filled with laughter at his expense. Now it was filled with quiet respect. He gave a short nod, wished them all a good night, and pushed open the doors. The cold winter air met him like an old friend. Lila ran after him, catching up on the snowy steps outside. She called his name, her voice trembling. He stopped and turned toward her. The snow landed on her hair, and she looked lost, her eyes full of tears. She asked how he had managed all this, how he had found peace after what happened. He smiled faintly and told her that pain could either break a man or build him. He had chosen to let it build him. Life had taught him that no one heals from bitterness, only from forgiveness. She stood silent, ashamed of the past. She told him she had been foolish and blind. She said she had been proud and weak, listening to others instead of her own heart. Her words flowed softly like falling snow. He listened quietly, and then said that he had forgiven her long ago. He told her he carried no hate. He said he wished her happiness, even if their paths could never meet again. His voice was gentle, and for a moment she wanted to reach for him, but she stopped herself. Some chances only come once, and hers had passed long ago. They stood there under the falling snow without speaking. The wind moved through the tall trees, and the sound of distant bells reached them from the city. Ethan put on his coat and gave her one last kind look, thanked her for what their life together had taught him. Without anger or sorrow, he turned and walked toward his car. She watched him go, his figure disappearing slowly into the white night. He did not look back. Inside the house, her family remained silent. The first time they looked unsure of themselves. The pride that had once filled the air was gone. The lesson of the night had humbled them in a way no loss of money or status ever could. Ethan's car moved through the quiet streets, leaving thin tracks behind. As he reached his apartment, he stopped by the window and looked out at the soft glow of the city. The snow covered the rooftops like a blanket of peace. He thought of how much had changed in 1 year. The man who once lost everything had found meaning again. But more than power or wealth, he had found peace within his heart. He walked into his study and sat at his desk. The documents of new partnerships lay before him, yet his eyes were drawn instead to an old picture in a small frame. It showed a younger version of himself and Lila, smiling together under a Christmas tree. He picked it up, smiled sadly, and placed it gently in a drawer. Some memories were not meant to be erased, only kept quietly as proof of how far one had come. Outside, the clock struck midnight. Fireworks burst over the skyline, bright against the dark sky. Ethan watched them for a while, their colors spreading over the snow. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes, feeling peace in every breath. His story with the Monroes was over, but a new one was waiting. The snow kept falling, silent and calm, just like his heart. The world outside glittered with hope, and he knew he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not revenge, but freedom.